Welcome back everybody, my name is Robert Doman, and in this video I'm going to be showing you the Platformer Plus plugin for GB Studio and how it can elevate your platformer games. So if you don't remember, GB Studio is a drag and drop game engine that lets you make Game Boy games that can be put onto cartridges or played in emulators. And before we begin, I'm going to show you my game Take-It Racing 2, which is on cartridge, and you can purchase it at robertdoman.co.uk. It comes in this nice little grey cartridge. It can then be played on your Game Boy just like this, and it's a racing management game, and you unlock cars and you unlock tracks, and you have to get all the way through each class of racing. Each one gets harder until you can win the game. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please check it out at robertdoman.co.uk. Also, I'll start by showing you what this Platformer Plus can do. First of all, we'll go over here, and we're dropped into this scene where we can actually drop down from platforms, and then as we see here, we can drop down and we can now swim. So what's basically happening is the gravity has changed, and we're able to press a certain button to jump, or to jump in the air while we're falling. So if we look in this scene, we can see that obviously we're dropped in at this point here. We then can come down to the platform, and the platform is just as you would normally draw it in with this wall here, and then have the blue, and that means we can pass through it one way, but obviously because we have the drop down mechanic, we can drop down through it. You see here, this is a trigger box, so on enter we have all this stuff set up, which basically changes the physics of the character while we're in this box, and then when we leave, we set it back to normal. So secondly, we'll go down here. So this scene is a little different. This one is for making completely different scene, or completely different games. So as you see here, we have this cursor that lets us kind of change our trajectory. So if we move over here, we want to kind of get over there as far as possible. There is a little bug with this one that once you go through this trigger, you can actually bounce. So I'll show you how to add that bouncing back at the beginning when you first click on that little bit there. So as you can see, we start in this scene, we get dropped down from this bit right here. We then have to make our way over to this actor here, that when we hit it, we turn into what we saw, and we have these scripts set up that change these cursors and make us, get launched. So like I said, there's actually a bug with this scene. So if you take this script that we have on this enter here, and we put it into this actor here, that on the on hit, I'll show you how that changes everything. So as you can see now, if I jump around, we now bounce when we land. So yeah, like I said, there's a little bug. So all you have to do is take that script that was on that other bit and put it here, and it adds a little bit of life to your game. Obviously you can think about different ways to implement this in your own games, but just adding that little bit of life can completely change the feeling of a game. And now I'll show you the other two example scenes in this demo here. And then I'll show you how you can add these plugins into your game, or just download this demo like I've done here and then make it into your own. So first off, we have the dashing tutorial scene. So if we do this correctly, we should be able to go through this block. Yep. Or we can dash into solid objects. We can then push things, or we can dash through them. Okay, so we just got the air dash, so this one's a bit more difficult. We have to jump and go, and you have to remember that you have to hold down the jump to increase the height and the range. Again, we can break this with our head, and we can now dash through these power things. So that means that there are settings that you can control that increase the complexity of the puzzles in your platforming games, which is fantastic. So let's have a look at that scene in here. Yeah, so like I said, there is a mechanic that if you hit it correctly, then it breaks the rock. Otherwise you just go through it like I showed you. And with this one, we can also push it, and this is actually just by checking to see if the player is on whichever side of them while they're pushing it. So that's actually a very simple way of pushing if you don't already know how to do it. And again, with these blocks that we're hitting with our head, if we're below it and it gets hit, then it breaks it. And then when we pick up this little bit here, you can see it gives us the ability to dash through triggers, actors, and walls. Well, before we only had actors and triggers, and so like I said, it can increase the complexity of your puzzles by having these settings. So now if we jump into the fourth and final example scene here, we can then press some buttons and we can go on moving platforms, which I think this is game changing for if you're a beginner in GB Studio. This kind of stuff is invaluable. You can't really do this in normal GB Studio where you have moving platforms. It's kind of amazing. And obviously this scene is a bit broken because I'm able to stand on the spikes here, but that's fine. But as you can see, this is another example where we can use wall jumping from actors, and imagine it being icicles or something and you have to speed run the game. It would be quite amazing the kind of variety of games you can have with these mechanics now. Oh yes, that was a bit hard. Okay, so so this is quite cool. We're standing on a platform, and when I'm pressing the buttons, it's changing the direction. Obviously, it can be a bit buggy, it feels like I'm trying to change it slightly, but it's not always working. So, yeah, obviously understanding how the game works will benefit you in when it comes to knowing whether or not you should implement a certain feature. So if I make this work now, if I'm not so experimental with it, let's see what it does. If I try and go up here. Fantastic. It's like a flying carpet or something. Amazing. So let's have a look in that scene and see how some of that stuff works. So obviously pressing this button or just walking on this button, it hits it, and then it makes this platform go down, and then when this is hit, it makes the platform go down again. These ones, let's have a look. Are they on a timer? Yeah, the timer is actually triggered by standing at the bottom, so that's quite cool. And then when we press this trigger here, it obviously moves this gate out the way, which then lets us finish the level. And these vertical platforms are obviously solid, seemingly solid, and then when we hit into them, it sets a timer for them to, you know, flash and then fall down. And then with this platform here, we have the fact we're hitting against it, like we're standing on it, means that we can then, when we're pressing left or right, it then changes the direction of where we're moving. I'm not exactly sure why it messed up, but I'm sure that if we were to spend a little more time on it and think about how would we'd use it in our game, we might be able to come up with a solution to make it a bit less problematic. Let's actually go back into GB Studio and have a look at the settings that are enabled with this. Here we go, Platformer Plus level controls. As you can see, we actually have a lot of options as to where we want the camera to follow us. So if you're thinking about locking the camera on a certain axis, here it is, it's right here. Camera dead zone, this means that when the player's moving around, how long does it take for the camera to start following, I think. Lock player to the edges of the camera. This might require some testing, but I think this is a bit like shoot 'em up, where you're locking the player onto a certain part of the screen, so when the camera moves, or when the player moves, so does the camera, exactly, right? So look, and again, we can drop through the platforms, and this is with a button press, and you can obviously say, do you want to hold it down or tap it? The platformer collision group, you can set it here, and the solid actor collision group, you can set here as well. He also adds some really good stuff here, like the coyote time, which means that when you're running quite fast, if you get to the edge of a ledge and you jump, if you jump a fraction too late, it lets you still jump. And if you exaggerate this, you can really see what I'm saying, because it becomes really obvious. But if you're playing a fast game that requires you to jump off of platforms, having this coyote time will be very kind to your players, and you should definitely think about adding it, just because it makes the game feel better than if you were to feel like I pressed the button before I got to the edge of the ledge, but I still fell and didn't allow me to jump. It would feel like the game is against you. So by increasing this, you're increasing the player's connection to the game a bit. Jump buffer, I believe this is so when you're falling, if you press it just before you hit the ground, the jump button, you will then jump once you hit the ground, which is very useful again for jumping games. Wall jumps, this means how many times you jump off the wall before you just fall. Enable wall slide, which is where you slide down the wall, which is quite cool, and you can then adjust the speed at which you do slide down the wall. I'm not exactly sure what the wall kickoff is. I'm guessing it's the strength in which you jump off the wall. This floating, I believe, is a feature that if you jump off a big ledge and you press this button or the jump button or whatever, or the up button, instead of just falling, you would then float. So it changes your the arc of your fall basically. And then again, here's the float speed fall. Enable air control. This is interesting. So you can jump and not be able to control yourself in the air. You can disable not changing direction in the air, which is also interesting. Looks like you can change the run style, which will change how I guess the running feels, which is definitely worth playing around with if you're making an in-depth platformer game. You want to be able to really control how your character feels. We've got dashing here, all the stuff for that. And just looking at the normal platformer, you can see how much stuff the Platformer Plus adds, and it really makes your game unique if you're adjusting these to fit your game, rather than having the very limited controls of the normal built-in GB Studio. So if you are making a platformer game in GB Studio, or you think about making a platformer game in GB Studio, definitely download this Platformer Plus demo right here and give it a go. Test it out, see how it feels. Play around with these settings that I've shown you, and get a kind of an understanding of how platformer games change quite dramatically from these little sliders and settings, because the built-in GB Studio is very limiting, and without this plugin there are a lot of design decisions that you have to cut out, and by having this you're freeing yourself up to make a more interesting and impressive game. I have seen comments in the past of people saying that they are afraid to use plugins because they may or may not be buggy, or they aren't official, for example. But GB Studio is an open source game engine, so it's supposed to have things like this. And although you did experience with me that moving platformer to be quite buggy, that just because that's buggy does not mean that you have to have it in your game, or that everything else in this plugin is buggy. You shouldn't be afraid of trying new things, especially when it comes to something like this where it completely expands your game mechanic repertoire as a developer. So definitely consider downloading this, or even if you're not thinking about making a platformer game, you should definitely still try this out, because I imagine that it will convince you to try your hand in doing it yourself. So I'll just run through how you would start playing this demo yourself. You just download this zip here, unzip it, and it's a project that you can then open up in GB Studio. If you open up GB Studio and choose Open Project, you can then find the file in your folders. If you wanted to add this to a project that you've already been working on, you would take the plugins out of the folder, or download these zips here, unzip them, and then take them into your project's plugin folder, or create it. Definitely go to the itch.io page that I'm showing here to figure it all out easier. And obviously, if this is your first experience with GB Studio, definitely open up the GB Studio's sample project first, play around with that, get a feel for what GB Studio is before making the leap to this, because understanding the absolute basics first will improve your understanding going forward into this one. So yeah, I really hope you found this video interesting and useful. Let me know if there's any issues you find that I didn't highlight in the video, and I'll put it in the comments. I'll put my patrons up on screen right now. Thank you so much to you guys. You guys are the absolute best. Remember to like the video if you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment on what you thought about this video and what you'd like to see in the future. So this year I want to make one tutorial video a month, so definitely let me know which tutorials you'd like. I think plugin videos are a really good idea because not a lot of people are aware of how useful they are and how much they improve your experience as a game developer in GB Studio. Yeah, so let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.